The winter wind cut through the streets of New York like a knife. People rushed past, their faces buried in scarves, their minds focused on getting home to warm apartments and hot meals. Nobody paid much attention to the man sitting against the cold brick wall near the entrance of Grand Central Station. To them, he was just another face in the crowd of struggles that filled the city streets. His name was Daniel. 42 years old, though he looked closer to 60. The streets have a way of doing that to a person. 3 years of sleeping in shelters under bridges and sometimes in subway stations had carved deep lines into his face. His hands were rough and scarred, his clothes layered and worn, carrying that particular smell that comes from not having regular access to showers and laundry. Next to him sat his only real possession of value, an old acoustic guitar scratched and faded, its case propped open with a handful of coins and a few crumpled dollar bills inside. The guitar had somehow survived everything with him. Through the worst nights, through the times he could have sold it for food money, through the moments when he wanted to give up completely, something always stopped him from letting it go. Daniel strummed softly, playing simple songs that most people would recognize. Classic rock tunes, old pop songs, the kind of music that wouldn't disturb anyone but might make them pause for a second. His fingers moved across the strings with a gentleness that seemed odd for someone with such rough, calloused hands. Most people dropped a coin or two without even looking at him. Some ignored him completely. A few gave him dirty looks as if his presence somehow ruined their day. What none of them knew, what nobody could tell just by looking at him, was that those hands had once played on some of the most prestigious stages in the country. Daniel wasn't always homeless. He wasn't always the man people crossed the street to avoid. 15 years ago, he had been someone different entirely. A classical guitarist with a growing reputation. He had studied at a top music conservatory, practiced 8 hours a day, and performed at concert halls where tickets cost more than he now made in a month. Critics called him promising. His teachers said he had a gift. He had an apartment, a wife, a future that seemed bright and certain. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Daniel was driving home from a performance, tired but happy. The concert had gone well. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit his car from the side. The impact sent his vehicle spinning into a concrete barrier. When Daniel woke up in the hospital 3 days later, his left hand was in a cast, 3 fingers badly damaged. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. They didn't understand that for a classical guitarist, damaged fingers weren't luck. They were the end of everything. The medical bills came fast and heavy. His insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Physical therapy, multiple surgeries trying to repair the nerve damage, medications for the chronic pain that wouldn't go away. The money disappeared quickly. Performances he had scheduled got canceled. Students stopped calling for lessons. Nobody wants a guitar teacher who can barely play anymore. His wife tried to stay supportive at first. But watching someone you love fall apart is harder than people think. The depression hit Daniel like a second accident. He stopped trying to play, stopped trying to do much of anything. He spent days in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point was. The fight started. About money, about his attitude, about the future they no longer had. After a year, she left. He didn't blame her. He probably would have left too if he could have. The apartment went next. Without income and with bills piling up, eviction was inevitable. Daniel found himself with 2 suitcases and a guitar, standing on a street corner trying to figure out what to do next. He stayed with a friend for a few weeks, then another friend for a few more. But charity has limits. People have their own lives, their own problems. Eventually, the offers stopped coming. The first night sleeping in a shelter was the hardest. The shame of it, the reality of how far he had fallen, crushed him. He kept thinking that this was temporary, that he would figure something out, that things would get better. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and somehow 3 years passed. 3 years of slowly forgetting who he used to be. At first, Daniel didn't play on the streets. The thought of it felt too humiliating. He had performed for audiences who sat in silence, listening to every note, who gave standing ovations. How could he play for people who walked past without looking? But hunger and cold have a way of breaking down pride. One desperate afternoon, he took out his guitar, sat on a corner, and played. The coins that dropped into his case bought him dinner that night. After that, it became routine. He learned quickly what worked and what didn't. Classical guitar pieces, the music he loved, the complex compositions that required skill and precision. Nobody cared. People wanted familiar songs, simple melodies they could recognize in 3 seconds while walking past. So that's what he played. Easy chords, basic rhythms. His fingers could still do that much even with the pain and stiffness. The real music, the pieces that once defined him, stayed locked away in his memory. Sometimes, late at night, in whatever shelter he managed to get into, Daniel would think about those old performances. He remembered the feeling of playing something perfectly, of hitting every note exactly right, of making the guitar sing in ways that moved people. He remembered the applause, the respect, the sense of purpose. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, some other person who lived some other life. The other homeless people around Grand Central knew him as the quiet guy with the guitar. He didn't talk much, didn't cause trouble, shared cigarettes when he had them, warned newcomers about which shelters to avoid and which streets the police patrolled. It was a different kind of community, built on survival and small kindnesses. On this particular December evening, Daniel was in his usual spot. The holiday season meant more foot traffic, more tourists, more people feeling generous. His case had collected maybe $15 over the past few hours. Enough for some food and coffee. He played without thinking much about it, his fingers moving through chords he could play in his sleep. The cold was settling in deeper as the sun went down. Daniel knew he needed to start heading toward the shelter soon if he wanted a bed for the night. They filled up fast in winter. He was just starting to pack up his guitar when someone stopped in front of him. Not rushing past, not dropping a coin while looking away, but actually stopping, actually looking at him. The man was Asian, maybe mid-30s, wearing an expensive coat and carrying a leather bag. He stood there staring at Daniel with an expression that seemed like recognition, though Daniel was certain they had never met. After a long moment, the man spoke. What he said next would change everything. The man stood there for what felt like forever, just staring. Daniel felt uncomfortable under the gaze. He was used to being invisible, or at worst being looked at with disgust or pity. But this was different. This man was looking at him like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Do you take requests?" the man finally asked. Daniel shrugged. "Depends on the song. I know most of the popular stuff." "No, I don't mean like that." The man shifted his bag to his other shoulder. "I mean, can you play anything you want?" "Anything at all?" It was an odd question. Daniel studied him more carefully now. The expensive coat was tailored, the kind of thing that cost more than Daniel used to spend on rent. But the man's face was kind, curious rather than condescending. His eyes had this intensity that made Daniel think he actually cared about the answer. "I guess so," Daniel said slowly. "Why?" The man pulled out his phone. "My name is Kevin. I work for a media company. We make videos, content for social media." "I was rushing to catch my train when I heard you playing. There was something about it, even though you were just doing basic chords, the way your fingers moved. It seemed like there was more there, you know?" Daniel felt his chest tighten. He didn't like where this was going. "Look, man, I'm not interested in being some charity case for a feel-good video." "That's not what this is," Kevin said quickly. "I'm not here to exploit you or make you dance for the camera. I just have this instinct about people, about talent, and something tells me you're not playing what you really can play." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. He looked down at his guitar, at his rough hands, at the handful of coins in his case. How did this stranger see through him so easily? "I used to play different stuff," Daniel admitted quietly. "A long time ago. What kind of stuff?" "Classical. Concert music. The complicated pieces that take years to learn." Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper now, but that was before. "I can't play like that anymore." Kevin crouched down so he was at eye level with Daniel. "Can I be honest with you? I don't know your story. I don't know what brought you here or what you've been through. But I've been doing this job for 8 years, and I've learned to recognize when someone is hiding their real self. You're playing it safe, playing what's easy. What if you tried something different?" "Why do you care?" Daniel asked, and he meant it. Why would this successful stranger care about some homeless guy with a guitar? "Because I almost gave up on my dreams once," Kevin said simply. "I was working in finance, making good money, completely miserable. Everyone told me I was crazy to quit and chase something as unstable as media production. But I did it anyway. And now I spend my days looking for stories that matter. Real stories. Not manufactured ones." Daniel sat in silence. Part of him wanted to tell Kevin to leave, to go catch his train and forget about this conversation. But another part of him, a part that had been asleep for 3 years, was waking up. That part remembered what it felt like to really play, to let the music take over and forget about everything else. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Daniel finally said. Kevin held up his phone. "Play one song. Anything you want. Something real. Something that shows who you actually are. Not just what you think people want to hear. I'll film it. No promises about what happens after. Maybe nothing. Maybe it goes viral. But at least you'll have played it." For yourself, if nothing else. The idea terrified Daniel. He hadn't attempted any of his old pieces in years. His fingers weren't what they used to be. The pain in his left hand flared up whenever he tried anything too complex. What if he failed? What if he proved to himself once and for all that the musician he used to be was truly gone? But then again, what did he have to lose? His pride? That was already scattered across 3 years of street corners. His reputation? Nobody knew who he was anymore. The worst that could happen was that he would play badly and this stranger would delete the video and move on with his life. "If I do this," Daniel said carefully, "you don't use my full name. You don't try to turn this into some big sob story. I'm not looking for pity." "Deal," Kevin agreed immediately. "I just want to see what you can really do." Daniel took a deep breath. His heart was pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He pulled his guitar onto his lap properly, adjusted his position against the wall. A crowd of commuters rushed past, none of them paying attention. It was almost evening now, the light fading, the temperature dropping. "There's a piece," Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly, "called Asturias. It's Spanish classical guitar. Isaac Albéniz composed it originally for piano, but it became famous as a guitar piece. It's one of the hardest pieces you can play on acoustic guitar." Kevin nodded, holding his phone up. "Whenever you're ready." Daniel closed his eyes. He tried to remember the last time he had played this piece. It was at a concert in Boston, maybe 14 years ago. He had been nervous then too, but it was a different kind of nervous. Performance anxiety mixed with excitement. Now it was just fear. Fear of failure. Fear of discovering that the past was truly dead. His fingers found the first position. The opening notes of Asturias are distinctive. A tremolo pattern that sounds almost like a mandolin. It requires rapid, precise picking that most guitarists spend months perfecting. Daniel's fingers were stiff, cold from sitting outside. The first few notes came out clumsy, hesitant. He almost stopped right there, almost gave up and told Kevin this was a mistake. But something pushed him forward. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just that he needed to know if anything of his old self remained. He kept playing. And slowly, incredibly, his fingers began to remember. Muscle memory is a strange thing. It lives deeper than conscious thought, deeper than pain or fear. His hands had played this piece hundreds of times, thousands of times. They knew it even if his mind doubted. The tremolo smoothed out. The notes started flowing faster. Daniel's breathing steadied. The wall behind him disappeared. The cold disappeared. The station, the commuters, Kevin with his camera, all of it faded away. There was only the guitar and the music. His left hand moved up and down the fretboard, fingers stretching for chords that should have been impossible with his old injury. But adrenaline and memory carried him through. His right hand picked out the rapid-fire melody, the complex rhythms that made Asturias so challenging. The piece built and built, cascading arpeggios mixing with powerful bass notes. Somewhere in the middle of the performance, Daniel realized people had stopped walking. He could sense them, a presence around him, but he kept his eyes closed. If he saw them watching, he might freeze up. So he played blind, trusting his fingers, surrendering to the music. The pain in his left hand was screaming now, but he pushed through it. This was the first real thing he had done in 3 years. The first moment where he wasn't just surviving, just getting through another day. He was actually living, actually being himself. The final section of Asturias is fast and furious, a sprint to the finish line. Daniel's fingers flew across the strings, his right hand a blur of motion. And then suddenly it was over. The last chord rang out into the cold December air. Daniel opened his eyes. What he saw made him forget how to breathe. At least 50 people had formed a semicircle around him. Maybe more. They stood in complete silence, staring at Daniel like they had just witnessed something impossible. Commuters who had been rushing to catch trains. Tourists with their phones out. Business people in suits. College students with backpacks. Even a few police officers who normally told homeless people to move along. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was so thick Daniel could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, like a dam breaking, the applause started. It wasn't polite clapping. It was the kind of applause Daniel remembered from his old life. Genuine, overwhelming, the sound of people who had just experienced something they didn't expect. Some people were wiping their eyes. A woman in a business suit had tears streaming down her face. An older man was shaking his head in disbelief. Daniel sat frozen, his guitar still in his lap, his fingers throbbing with pain. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't prepared for this. When you're homeless, you become invisible. People look through you, not at you. But right now, every single person in that crowd was seeing him. Really seeing him. Kevin was still filming, a huge grin on his face. "Don't stop the camera," he muttered to himself, panning to capture the crowd's reaction. "This is incredible." A young guy in a college hoodie stepped forward first. He pulled out his wallet and dropped a $20 bill into Daniel's guitar case. Then a businessman did the same. Then a woman in scrubs, probably a nurse heading home from her shift. Within minutes, Daniel's case was overflowing with bills. 20s, 10s, even a few 50s. More money than he usually made in a week. But that wasn't what shocked Daniel. It was their faces, the way they looked at him with respect. Admiration, even. Not pity, not disgust. They saw him as a musician, an artist, not as a homeless man who happened to have a guitar. "That was beautiful," the nurse said, crouching down beside him. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Daniel's throat was tight. "Conservatory. Long time ago." "Well, you haven't lost it," she said warmly. "That was one of the most moving performances I've ever heard. And I've been to Carnegie Hall." Carnegie Hall, Daniel had played there once, a lifetime ago. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else. More people came up to talk to him, to shake his hand, to thank him for the music. An elderly woman told him he reminded her of her late husband, who had also been a classical guitarist. A teenager said he had been having the worst day until he heard that performance. One man simply said, "You have a gift. Don't waste it." Kevin finally stopped filming and came over. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Daniel, that was extraordinary. I got the whole thing. The performance, the crowd reaction, everything. What are you going to do with it?" Daniel asked, suddenly nervous again. "I'm going to edit it tonight and post it tomorrow," Kevin said. "No promises, but I think people need to see this. Is that okay?" Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no, wanted to keep hiding. But another part, the part that had just played Asturias for the first time in years, wanted the world to know he still existed, that he was still a musician even if he lived on the streets. "Okay," Daniel said quietly. "But like I said, no full name. Just Daniel." "Just Daniel," Kevin agreed. "I'll keep it simple. Let the music speak for itself." The crowd was dispersing now, people reluctantly heading back to their lives. But some stayed behind, lingering as if they didn't want the moment to end. Daniel started to pack up his guitar, his hands shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. The pain in his left hand was worse than it had been in months, but somehow he didn't care. It had been worth it. Kevin handed him a business card. "My number's on there. Call me in a few days. I have a feeling this video is going to get some attention. You should be prepared for that." Daniel took the card, not really believing anything would come of it. He had learned not to hope too much. Hope hurt worse than anything when it got taken away. That night, Daniel managed to get a bed at the shelter. He lay awake for hours, his mind replaying the performance over and over. The feel of the strings under his fingers, the sound of the guitar singing, the faces of the people watching. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like himself again. Not the broken version, not the survivor, but the real him. The musician. He didn't sleep much. When morning came, Daniel went through his usual routine. Coffee at the church that gave out free breakfast. A stop at the public library to use the bathroom and wash up as best he could. Then back to his spot near Grand Central. It was Friday, usually a good day for collecting money since people were in better moods heading into the weekend. He was playing a simple Beatles song when Kevin appeared again, out of breath and looking frantic. "Daniel, I've been looking everywhere for you. Do you have a phone? Any way to get online?" "No," Daniel said, confused. "Why?" Kevin pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with excitement. "The video. I posted it last night around midnight. Daniel, it has 2 million views. 2 million. In less than 12 hours. Daniel stared at him. "That's not possible." "Look." Kevin turned the phone screen toward him. There it was. A video titled, "Homeless Musician Plays Impossible Classical Piece and Stuns NYC." The view counter was climbing even as Daniel watched. 2.1 million, 2.2 million. The comments section was exploding. Hundreds of new comments appearing every minute. Daniel's hands went numb. He couldn't process what he was seeing. Kevin scrolled through some of the comments, reading them out loud. This made me cry. Where can I donate to help this man? This is the most beautiful thing I've heard all year. He plays better than most professionals. Someone please find him and get him help. This is insane, Daniel whispered. It gets better, Kevin said. Or crazier, depending on how you look at it. A bunch of musicians have shared the video. Some news websites are picking it up. And check this out. He showed Daniel his messages. I've had maybe 50 people message me asking how they can help you. Offering money, housing, job opportunities. A music school in Brooklyn wants to know if you'd be interested in teaching. Daniel felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast. Yesterday he was invisible. Today millions of people had watched him play. It didn't make sense. There's more, Kevin continued. Someone started a GoFundMe. I didn't do it, but whoever did is collecting donations for you. It's already at $30,000. $30,000? Daniel's voice cracked. That's more money than I've seen in 3 years combined. And it's still climbing, Kevin said. Daniel, your life is about to change. Like, completely change. Are you ready for that? Daniel looked down at his guitar, at his rough hands, at the few coins in his case from this morning. Was he ready? He had no idea. Change was terrifying, especially when you had spent 3 years just trying to survive each day. But maybe, just maybe, this was his chance, his one shot at getting back what he had lost. I don't know, Daniel admitted. But I guess I'm about to find out, Kevin grinned. That's the spirit, come on. First thing we need to do is get you somewhere you can see all of this properly, and maybe get you some food. Real food, not shelter food. This is going to be a long day. As Daniel stood up, guitar in hand, he glanced back at his spot on the sidewalk, the place where he had spent countless hours playing for spare change, where he had become invisible. He wondered if he would ever sit there again. The next 3 days were a blur. Daniel couldn't wrap his head around what was happening. The video had exploded beyond anything Kevin had predicted. 10 million views. 20 million. By the third day, it had crossed 40 million and was still climbing. News channels were showing clips. Radio stations were talking about it. People on social media were calling him the homeless virtuoso. Kevin had taken Daniel to a hotel that first night. Nothing fancy, but it had a real bed, a shower, heat. Daniel stood under the hot water for almost an hour, watching 3 years of street grime wash away. He had forgotten what it felt like to be clean. Really clean. When he looked in the mirror afterward, he barely recognized himself. The next morning, Kevin showed up with shopping bags full of clothes. Jeans, shirts, a warm jacket. I guessed your size, Kevin said. We can exchange anything that doesn't fit. But you're going to be doing some interviews today, and I figured you'd want to look presentable. Interviews? Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. I don't know if I can do that. You can, Kevin said firmly. Just be yourself. Tell your story. People want to know who you are. The first interview was with a local news station. The reporter was kind, asking gentle questions about his background and how he ended up on the streets. Daniel stumbled through his answers, unused to talking about himself. He told them about the conservatory, the accident, the medical bills, the divorce, about losing everything piece by piece until there was nothing left. When the segment aired that evening, Daniel watched it on Kevin's laptop. Seeing himself on screen was surreal. He looked different in the new clothes, cleaner, but his eyes still carried that haunted look that came from years of survival mode. The GoFundMe had reached $120,000. Daniel couldn't comprehend that number. It was more money than he had made in some years, even when he was performing professionally. People from all over the world were donating. $5, $10, sometimes $100. Each donation came with a message. Your music touched my soul. Please use this to get back on your feet. You deserve a second chance. My father was a musician too. This is for him. Daniel read every single message, tears streaming down his face. These were complete strangers who owed him nothing. Yet they cared. They wanted to help. It was overwhelming in a way he couldn't explain. On the fourth day, something even more unexpected happened. Kevin got a call from someone named Patricia, who ran a non-profit organization that helped homeless individuals with career rehabilitation. She had seen the video and wanted to meet Daniel. They met at a coffee shop in Manhattan. Patricia was in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She got straight to the point. Daniel, I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've seen a lot of talented people fall through the cracks. What happened to you isn't unusual. One bad break, one medical emergency, and suddenly you're on the streets. The system fails people like you every day. Daniel nodded, not sure what to say. But here's the thing, Patricia continued. You've been given an opportunity that most people don't get. This attention, this money, it won't last forever. We need to move fast and smart. I want to help you, but you have to be willing to do the work. What kind of work? Daniel asked. First, we get you into stable housing. I have connections with a program that provides apartments for people transitioning out of homelessness. Second, we get you medical care. Your hand needs to be looked at by a specialist. If there's any way to improve your condition, we find it. Third, we figure out your long-term plan. What do you want to do with your life now? That last question hit Daniel hard. What did he want? For 3 years, he had only thought about surviving the next day, finding food, finding shelter, staying safe. He hadn't let himself think about the future because the future seemed impossible. I want to play again, Daniel said quietly. Really play, not just on street corners. I want to teach maybe. Pass on what I know to people who actually want to learn. Patricia smiled. Then that's what we'll work toward. The medical appointment came first. A hand specialist examined Daniel's left hand, looking at the old injury and the nerve damage. The doctor was honest with him. The damage is permanent. You'll never have quite the same dexterity you had before the accident. But with physical therapy and pain management, we can improve your function. You might be surprised what you can still do. Physical therapy started the next week. It was painful and frustrating. The therapist had Daniel doing exercises that seemed pointless, squeezing putty and stretching rubber bands. But slowly, gradually, he noticed improvement. His fingers were less stiff. The pain decreased. He could make shapes and movements that had been impossible a month ago. While his hand was healing, other things were falling into place. Patricia's organization found him a small studio apartment in Queens. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was his. Daniel sat on the floor that first night, looking around at the empty space, and cried. He had a home again. The GoFundMe money was put into a trust with Patricia's help, managed carefully so Daniel wouldn't blow through it. Some went to immediate needs like furniture and food. Some was set aside for ongoing medical care. The rest was saved for the future, for when the media attention died down and he needed to support himself. But the most unexpected development came from a music school in Brooklyn. The director, a woman named Ruth, had been a classical guitarist herself before moving into education. She had watched Daniel's video a dozen times and saw something in his playing that moved her. We need instructors who have lived real lives, Ruth told him over the phone. Students these days, they need teachers who understand that music isn't just about technical perfection. It's about soul. About expressing something true. You have that. She offered him a part-time teaching position, 2 days a week working with intermediate students. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady. More importantly, it was purpose. A reason to get up in the morning that wasn't just survival. Daniel's first day teaching was terrifying. He stood in front of a classroom of 8 teenagers, all holding guitars, all staring at him. They knew who he was. They had seen the video. Some of them looked skeptical, like they didn't believe a homeless guy could teach them anything. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers, Daniel told them honestly. I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I lost everything because I gave up when things got hard. But I'm here now and I'm going to teach you everything I know, not just about playing guitar, but about why it matters. About why music is worth fighting for even when everything else falls apart. One kid in the back, a boy with dyed blue hair and an attitude problem, raised his hand. Why should we listen to you? You were living on the streets. The question could have been cruel, but Daniel heard the genuine curiosity beneath it. You're right, Daniel said. I was. And maybe that's exactly why you should listen. Because I know what happens when you take your talents for granted. When you let fear stop you from doing what you're meant to do. I'm not here to tell you I'm better than you. I'm here to make sure you don't make the same mistakes I did. The kid nodded slowly and something shifted in the room. They were listening now. Really listening. By the end of that first class, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just satisfaction, but joy. Pure, simple joy in doing what he was meant to do. As he packed up his guitar and headed back to his small apartment in Queens, Daniel realized that the viral video hadn't just changed his circumstances. It had reminded him of who he was. 6 months passed like a dream Daniel was afraid to wake up from. The studio apartment in Queens became a real home, filled with music books, a decent coffee maker, and photos on the walls. His students at the music school had grown from 8 to 15, and some of them were actually getting good. The blue-haired kid with the attitude turned out to have real talent once he stopped trying to act tough. Daniel's hand had improved more than the doctors expected. The physical therapy worked wonders, and while he would never have the same speed and flexibility as before the accident, he could play most pieces with enough practice. The pain was manageable now with proper medication and care, but something was missing. Despite everything good that had happened, Daniel felt incomplete. There was a weight in his chest that wouldn't go away, a sadness that crept in during quiet moments. It took him weeks to figure out what it was. He missed his daughter. Her name was Sophie. She would be 23 now, probably graduated from college. Daniel hadn't seen her since the divorce, hadn't spoken to her in over 5 years. His ex-wife had gotten full custody and Sophie had been angry with him back then. Angry about the drinking that came with the depression. Angry about how he had given up. Angry that her father had become someone she didn't recognize. Daniel had told himself it was better this way. That Sophie was better off without him in her life. But now, with everything that had changed, he couldn't stop thinking about her, wondering if she had seen the video, wondering if she even cared. One evening after class, Ruth called him into her office. She had a strange expression on her face, something between excitement and nervousness. "Daniel, I got an interesting email today," she said, "from someone claiming to be your daughter." Daniel's heart stopped. "Sophie? She saw one of the news articles about you. She's been trying to find a way to contact you and somehow track down the school. She wants to know if you'd be willing to meet her." The room spun. Daniel sat down heavily in the chair across from Ruth's desk. "Did she say anything else?" "Just that she's living in the city, working as a graphic designer, and that she's thought about reaching out for a long time but didn't know how." Ruth handed him a piece of paper with an email address written on it. "No pressure, Daniel. Only if you're ready." Daniel stared at the email address. His hands were shaking. Was he ready? What if Sophie hated him? What if she only wanted to tell him face to face how much he had hurt her? But what if she didn't? What if there was a chance, however small, to be part of her life again? That night, Daniel must have started typing an email 20 times. Each attempt felt wrong. Too formal, too casual, too apologetic, too defensive. Finally, at 2 a.m, exhausted and emotionally drained, he wrote something simple and hit send before he could second-guess himself. "Sophie, it's your dad. I would love to meet you. Just tell me when and where," she responded the next morning. "Saturday, 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop on Amsterdam Avenue. I'll be there." The days leading up to Saturday were torture. Daniel barely slept. He practiced what he would say, then decided it all sounded stupid. He changed his shirt 3 times that morning. Kevin, who had become a good friend, told him to relax and just be honest. "She reached out to you," Kevin reminded him. "That means something. She wants to see you." Daniel arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. He ordered a coffee he was too nervous to drink and sat at a table by the window, watching every person who walked by. At exactly 2 p.m, a young woman entered the shop and Daniel knew immediately it was Sophie. She had her mother's eyes but his dark hair. She was tall, confident in the way she moved, but he could see the nervousness in how she scanned the room. When their eyes met, she froze for a moment. Then slowly she walked over to his table. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Hi, Sophie." Daniel's voice cracked. He wanted to hug her but didn't know if he had the right. "Thank you for coming." She sat down across from him, setting her bag on the empty chair. For a long moment they just looked at each other. 5 years of absence hung between them like a wall. "I saw the video," Sophie finally said. "Actually, my roommate showed it to me. She didn't know it was you. She just thought the performance was beautiful. When I realized it was you playing, I couldn't breathe." "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "For everything. For falling apart. For disappearing. For not being the father you deserved." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I was so angry at you for so long. When Mom told me you were homeless, I told myself I didn't care. That you had made your choices and had to live with them. But I did care. I just didn't know what to do about it." "You don't owe me anything," Daniel said. I know that. I messed up in every way possible. If you came here to tell me that, I understand. That's not why I came. Sophie wiped her eyes with a napkin. I came because watching that video, seeing you play like that, it reminded me of when I was little. Before everything went wrong. You used to play for me at bedtime. Do you remember? Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He remembered. Sophie had been maybe 6 or 7, and she would sit on the floor of his practice room while he played. She said it helped her fall asleep. I realized something, Sophie continued. I spent so much time being angry about who you became that I forgot about who you were. The video showed me that person is still in there, and I wanted to see if we could, I don't know, maybe start over? Not pretend the past didn't happen, but try to move forward? I would like that more than anything, Daniel said, tears running down his face now. I don't deserve a second chance with you, but if you're willing to give me one, I promise I won't waste it. They talked for 3 hours that afternoon. Sophie told him about college, about her job, about the boyfriend she had been dating for a year. Daniel told her about teaching, about his students, about slowly rebuilding his life. It wasn't easy. There were awkward silences and painful moments when old wounds came up. But there was also laughter, shared memories, a tentative reconnection. Before they left, Sophie asked him something unexpected. Would you play something for me? Not here, obviously, but maybe I could come to one of your classes sometime. I'd like to hear you play again. Really hear you, not just through a phone screen. Of course, Daniel said. Anytime you want. 3 weeks later, Sophie came to the music school. She sat in the back of the classroom while Daniel taught his students. After class, when everyone else had left, he played for her. Not Asturias this time, but something gentler. A piece called Recuerdos de la Alhambra, which means memories of the Alhambra. It was about remembering beautiful things from the past. As he played, Daniel realized something profound. The viral video hadn't just given him back his career or his home. It had given him something more important. It had given him back his identity, not as the successful musician he used to be, or the broken homeless man he had become, but as someone new, someone who had fallen and gotten back up, someone who had lost everything and found a way to rebuild. When he finished playing, Sophie was crying, but they were good tears. I missed this, she said. I missed you. I missed you too, Daniel replied. More than you'll ever know. 4 months later, Daniel gave his first official performance since the accident. It wasn't Carnegie Hall. It was a small theater in Brooklyn, a benefit concert organized by Patricia's nonprofit to raise money for homeless musicians. The tickets sold out in 2 days. Daniel stood backstage, his guitar in hand, feeling the familiar pre-performance nerves. But this time it was different. Kevin was there, making sure everything was filmed properly. Ruth was there with several of his students. Patricia was there with people she had helped over the years, and in the front row, Sophie sat next to her mother. Daniel's ex-wife had reached out a month ago, saying she was proud of him. They would never get back together, but they were finding a way to be civil, to co-parent in retrospect, to acknowledge that they had both done the best they could with impossible circumstances. When Daniel walked onto the stage, the applause was immediate and thunderous. He sat on the simple stool in the spotlight, adjusted his guitar, and looked out at the crowd. All these people who had supported him, believed in him, given him another chance. Thank you all for being here, Daniel said into the microphone. A year ago, I was playing on street corners, invisible to the world. Tonight, I'm here because one person stopped to listen, because millions more cared enough to help a stranger. This performance is for everyone who's ever felt invisible, who's ever thought it was too late to start over, who's ever needed someone to believe in them. He began to play, and the theater fell silent. This time, Daniel played with his eyes open. He wanted to see the faces, wanted to remember this moment, wanted to stay present for every second of this second chance he had been given. The music filled the theater, and Daniel knew that no matter what happened next, he had found his way back. Not to who he used to be, but to who he was meant to become. And that was worth more than any performance, any applause, any recognition. It was worth everything.